I'm Jessica. I'm the CBI Events Director. This session is Strategic Planning for Student Media, and our presenter today is Greg Weston. He's CBI Immediate Past President and GM of WPTS at University of Pittsburgh. If you want to reach out to us directly, my email is events@askcbi.org, and Greg is past president at askcbi.org. This session's being recorded for the CBI website, just so you know. And then our next session will be Wednesday, October 14th. And we're actually going to demo the event platform that we're going to use for the fall convention. It's Attendify, which we've used for our app for the convention schedule, but it's now fully interactive with conference support. So we want to show it off and let everybody get familiar with it before the event. And then, of course, the first ever online NSEMC is October 28th through 30th. Registration's open now, and this year, since we know a whole lot of stuff's going on, registration is $100 per outlet, not per person. So if your outlet pays $100, you can send as many people from that outlet as you want. We should be releasing some of the sessions lists in the next week or two, but check out askcbi.org/NSEMC2020 for more information or to register. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg. He's got slides and is going to present. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. If you are worried you're going to forget what you want to ask. And I'm going to be here. I'm going to keep letting people in and make sure everything's running smoothly. So, all right, go ahead, Greg.
All right, thank you, Jessica. I'm going to share my screen here. Everyone see that okay? So yeah, so thank you for attending. I know we had a bunch more people register, and hopefully Jessica will be able to see them and get them in here before they miss too much of the good stuff. But I know Zoom is a little funky when it comes to actually doing things. You know, it's a little easier when you're actually at a convention and you just have to walk to the room, whether it's actually, as opposed to actually remembering to actually tune in at a particular time from your house that you're quarantined in or whatever. But I'm sort of stalling a little bit to get a few more people in, but I will stop stalling now and I will start the actual presentation. And this is something I really like to talk about, strategic planning, because I think when people talk about management and leadership skills, there are a number of them that come up all the time, like motivating and having a vision and conflict management and things like that. But I think strategic planning is a really important one that actually gets lost, and I think people really don't understand. I think anyone who's in a leadership position plans, right? You know, if you're applying to be your station manager, you probably had to write your goals down. And I'm sure we all have to do these for our supervisors if you're an advisor. But the strategic part actually gets left in the dust a lot. So to me, the strategy really happens mostly before you start to plan. So as you can see in the slide here, I propose, a three-step process for strategic planning. And the first thing is the organizational foundation, just kind of understanding what your organization does, where you want it to go, how you want to operate, those kind of things. The second thing is, especially in media, but for any organization, you have a market, right? You have an audience or customers, or you have some kind of factors outside affecting you. So even though what you are inherently might not change, the world around you is always changing. So you have to be cognizant of that. So once you do those two things, then you can really, really actually plan. Once you've strategically created your organizational foundation and looked at the surrounding around you. So I'm going to go through, just kind of try to lay out a really concise three-step process there for planning. And then at the end, since I recognize we're coming from all different places and maybe some of you have done some portions of this or not done, or your organization's structured a little differently, I'm going to go over a few other strategic planning models that may or may not apply to you guys. So the first thing, you need to create those foundational parts of your organization. And the most basic thing of any organization is their mission statement. And you probably all have a mission statement somewhere, but I'm going to guess not all of you really know what it is or have looked at it in a really long time. which is fine. But you should have a mission statement that kind of answers these questions. You don't have to explicitly answer the questions I have here on the screen, but these are the things you should be thinking about when you're developing your mission statement. And if you have one that's gathering dust somewhere, take it out and look and see if it still applies. I think a mission statement, usually probably lasts a good 8 to 10 years, but after that, you probably want to redo it, or at least think about it. For a student organization, for any organization really, first of all, the implicit question in this mission statement is why, right? Why are you existing? What's the point? What are we doing that no one else is doing? Like I say on the screen, what value are we bringing? What can we only do that no one else is doing? And if you look at Fortune 500 companies, sometimes they'll have like huge page-long mission statements. For student media, there's no need to really get into that kind of depth. One sentence, maybe a paragraph, just kind of getting at the heart of why you exist. It should be clear and concise, but it should not be ultra specific. Like I said, it can last for 8 or 10 years. So you're not talking about the exact things you're doing. If you're a radio station, you can talk about the music you play, but you shouldn't really be talking about a particular format because that can change. Trends can change. You might want to go in another direction, but that doesn't necessarily change that your mission is to, support artists or whatever it may be. And a good mission statement also is a good reminder internally. I mean, it's there. It's usually on a website where you can, externally message, but it's also a good internal message. Like, okay, what are we doing here? Why are we existing? And that mission statement is a good reminder of it. So even though it should be concise, this is the kind of thing you don't dash off on a cocktail napkin. You really take a lot of time making it perfect, making sure every single word is right, and then you put it in the drawer for 10 years. So let's take a look at some mission statements. Here's one from an organization I'm sure you're very familiar with. And this was their mission statement until 2017. And if you recall, in the years prior to that, you had a lot of issues with safeguarding people's data. Then in the 2016 election, Facebook, was really, really criticized for how they managed things, how they, say connected some of their users with some questionable content. Well, I always kind of laughed when people complained about Facebook, giving people access to their data. Look at their mission statement. Does it say anything about privacy? Right? Quite the opposite. Their whole point is to make everything an open book. And give people the power to share, make the world more open and connected. That's not the place you want to go if you want to post some kind of private pictures or things about yourself. For even though you can restrict only friends can see it, that's not really what Facebook is all about. So if you're looking for privacy and data security, Facebook is really not for you. They did change this in 2017 after a lot of criticism, but ultimately it's still pretty much the same, right? They just couched it in a more positive words like community and bringing the world closer together. But again, the point is they're an open book. You should expect Facebook, your Facebook stuff to be public. And they're not making any bones about it if you look at their mission statement. Next, I'll show you mission statement for a company you probably haven't heard of. It's something called Bizilla. And I'm just going to read it because the print is a little small and it's a lot longer. But our mission is to help connect people who want to sell a business with people who want to buy a business. We provide business owners and brokers with flexible options for listing their business online. For buyers, we offer helpful tools such as our saved listings features and customized email alerts to make finding the right business easier. Okay, also, for the most part, I consider this a really good mission statement because I'm going to guess very few of any of you have ever heard of Bizilla, but by reading that, you probably have a really good idea of what they're doing, what they're there to do. Connect people who want to sell a business with people who want to buy them, flexible options. The one thing I would change here, I think that last sentence is too specific. The helpful tools such as our saved listings feature and customized email alerts, I would eliminate that phrase and just say helpful tools. Because if they want to change their customized email alerts to tweets or something, they would have to redo their whole mission statement. But other than that one phrase, I think this is a really good mission statement, which says to somebody who stumbles upon them exactly what they're doing, and also reminds themselves and their employees when they're thinking about where they want to go, okay, this is our mission. This is our core function. Let's not stray too far from that. Here's our mission statement at WPTS where I work. And this might be very common for student media outlets, something you might want to think about if you're developing your mission statements, because it's what I call bifurcated. Because we're not a business, right? We're here, we have a responsibility to our community, to our audience, but also to our members. Most of us are providing some kind of pre-professional training or something like that. So we developed a mission statement that encompasses both of those things. High quality programming to the university, community, audience, but then the second mission is providing experience to our members. So that kind of bifurcated mission statement, again, might be something to think about in a student organization environment. Another media example, this is from Capital Public Radio, a professionally staffed radio network licensed to Sacramento State. It's really talks about a lot of the values they hold, right? Trusted, indispensable. It's not just we're providing information, they're talking about these important things that they're doing, and they're also strengthening the civic and cultural life. So they're not only showing what they're doing, but also the impact they want to have in the broader community, which is something really good, I think, for any nonprofit or service organization to have in their mission statement. So that's mission statements. I encourage all of you, again, you probably have one somewhere. It's probably in your organization constitution or something, but if you haven't looked at it in a while, I encourage you to dig it out, look at it, and see if it works in 2020. So that's the first thing. The first foundational document is your mission statement. The next one is the vision statement. So it's a mission statement for the future. So if the mission statement is what you are, what you do, the vision statement is where. Where do you want to go? And even more so than a mission statement, it should be really clear and concise, should really get at values that your organization holds dear. But more than that, it should be inspirational. Somebody should look at your mission, your vision statement, and be inspired. Think, yeah, like if you're recruiting members and they're looking at your website to find out what it's all about, they say, yeah, I want to be a part of that. That's a great vision statement. So really short, to the point. It's not about specific goals. Doubling your audience next semester. That's a goal. That's an objective. That is not a vision. A vision should be broader. It can be vaguer. Again, it could be externally focused on the impact you want to have, or it could be internally focused on what you want to do. But again, short, sweet, to the point. The Human Rights Campaign, they have a great vision statement. It's only 3 words long: equality for everyone. Right? Brief, understandable, inspirational. The more vivid and inspirational it is, the more it will motivate people to join, to be a part of your organization, get on board with what you're trying to do. Here are a few examples of media-related vision statements. Can anyone guess what any of these groups are? Nothing less than realizing the full potential of the internet, driving a new era of development, growth, and productivity. Again, great, great inspirational thing. Who doesn't want to see a new era of development, growth, and productivity? That's Creative Commons. The next one, American Public Media, indispensable resource for our audience and an essential public service for our communities. So drawing a little distinction there for our audience and the communities, but they're going beyond just their listeners to really provide that broader public service. Imagine a world in which every single person is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. Again, I'm getting worked up just reading these. That is Wikipedia. Great mission. Obviously a very, very successful project they've had. My absolute favorite vision statement is not from a media organization. It's Habitat for Humanity, a world where everyone has a decent place to live. Great vision, inspirational, exciting. But the other thing is they go out and build houses. Every single time they build a house, they get a little closer to that vision statement. So even though it's super inspirational, pie in the sky, they'll probably never get there, they can see tangible progress every time they complete a project. I work in the Student Affairs Department here at Pitt. We have, again, a great vision statement. It's providing the University of Pittsburgh student with the best collegiate experience in the world. Not measurable at all, not a tangible thing. Inspiring, right? That's why we're in this business as student affairs practitioners. We want students to have a great experience, but also it's a standard that we uphold. And I know the dean who came up with this would use that to measure programs. So we come up with an idea and we want funding. Because she could ask, well, is this going to help us provide the best collegiate experience in the world? If yes, she would find a way to fund it. If no, or if there's a current program she feels isn't doing that, we'll put our resources elsewhere. So that vision statement isn't just to, sound good or be inspirational. It can also really be that roadmap to where you want to go and a standard by which you're evaluating your current and future projects. Those are the two main foundational documents. A couple of other things I want to talk about briefly. The core values. Any organization should have core values. Those are the hows. So if you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, where you want to go, how are you doing it? Those are more cultural. They can be simply a list of words. The things, our core value, integrity, assessment, diversity, all those things can be as simple as that. At our station, we go a little bit more than single words into just, short phrases, but they're still basically the same thing. Fostering a diverse environment, engaging with our community. We want our students to be creative. We want them to explore, that's right in there. And then the last two, anything that I am a part of, I always strive for excellence. I always try to be passionate. Those are two core values that we have in our organization. Final foundational thing, critical success factors. What do you need to succeed? It can be funding is obviously a big one, right? Those 4K cameras, they're not going to buy themselves. It can be people. It can be space. I don't know about your campus. We live in an urban campus and there's not a lot of room to expand. So, for a lot of organizations on our campus, we just don't have the physical space to have a really nice studio, a state-of-the-art studio, things like that. Whatever those things may be. Their critical success factors can be for the whole organization, or maybe you're identifying a specific goal or project. Not a bad idea to come up with the critical success factors for those. And those probably aren't going to last 8 or 10 years. Some of them might, but others, they might change a little more rapidly. So critical success factors can be a little fluid. Maybe you've secured a big funding stream. That's no longer a critical success factor, but now that your campus is 80% remote, you really need the people more. Whereas a couple of years earlier, maybe it was the opposite. You had tons of students and no money. But those are the 4 things, that you really have to figure out what they are, how they appear for your organization before you can move forward with successful strategic planning. Once you've done that and you have a really clear idea of where you are going, where you're going, what you are as an organization, the next thing is to look and see how you orient yourself with the world around you. And there are a lot of different tools to do this. I am a big fan of a SWOT analysis. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with this. A SWOT analysis is just an acronym. I'm going to drop a few acronyms on you. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So, strengths, pretty self-explanatory, right? What do you have a lot of? Maybe your strength is you're really well funded. You have a super dedicated team of student leaders. What are you really good at? There's a sales term I really like, unique selling proposition. So what is yours? What are you doing that's really special out there? I am in a large market operating a college radio station. There are 90 radio stations in our market. And I always say to my students, we have to have something unique about us, a unique selling proposition that those other 89 stations are not doing. So what is that? That should be your strength. Strengths are generally in the here and now, and they're internal to your organization. Weaknesses also present and internal, but they're the areas that you're not as good at. maybe areas you don't have enough resources. Maybe you're hearing a lot of complaints from your audience or your members. Maybe people are quitting your organization because of A, B, and C. Those are weak areas. You want to be honest with yourself, look at those and see how you can improve them. Again, generally present and internal. Opportunities, those are usually external and in the future. So, are there new trends? Are there partnerships? Those of us in media, right? Technology has turned things upside down in the last decade or so. Those are a huge number of opportunities. If you notice in the mission statement for WPTS, I showed you earlier, we said something like our campus, our community, and our audience, because we realize with technology, our audience might not be in our city or on our campus. They could be wherever. And we wanted to acknowledge that in our mission statement. Those are opportunities from technology. Technologies can often be leveraged by your strengths. Threats are kind of the downside of opportunity. They are normally in the future as well. They're often external. In the business world, when they talk about SWOT analyses, they talk about threats being external, but in a student media organization, they definitely can be internal. You can't just hire people to replace people who leave necessarily, or you have a pool of students to recruit from for staff. So, things like a negative culture can be internal, but also be really, really threatening to a student media outlet. Those perceptual threats. Those college radio folks are so stuck up. I don't want to have anything to do with that organization. That's something, then you can't recruit people and you've got a big problem. We talked about, some trends. Technology can be a great opportunity, it can be a threat too. If nobody's watching your campus TV station, listening to an FM radio station because they're all on social media, that can be a real threat to your organization. So here's just a little thing I swiped from the internet just about how all these things kind of work together. Strengths and opportunities, you can use your strengths to take advantage of those opportunities or minimize the threats. Likewise, you can find some opportunities that link with some weaknesses. Maybe there's another campus organization which is really strong in an area you're weak in, and you can overcome that weakness by exploiting a partnership opportunity. And then the last one, weaknesses and threats. If your weaknesses align with threats, that's obviously a very, very huge problem. So that's what you absolutely have to focus on first. If you see a weakness that's aligned with a threat, you drop everything else. You don't worry about opportunities and strengths and all that. You play defense and you fix that as soon as possible. So here's how we do SWOT analysis at our station. We have a pretty large student director board. We go on a retreat whenever there's not a pandemic before the school year starts. And I break them into 4 groups, and I give each group a piece of, easel paper and a colored marker. They get 4 different colors. And each of the pieces of paper has a letter on it. And so they'll start with S, W, O, or T. They'll write as many as they can think of in about 10 minutes. Then I have them switch. So they'll carry their color with them to another category. And so they'll go through. If they really agree or disagree with the first group's answers, they can put a check mark or an X if they disagree, and they'll add their own. We go through this until the 4 colors are on all 4 pieces of paper, and then we hang them up on the wall and we discuss them. So someone will say, okay, green group, you said this was a strength, but the other 3 groups put X's. What's going on? And we have a super long discussion about it. And we come out of there with half of our planning already done, because we've winnowed it down to what we really clearly believe are our strengths, weaknesses, and then we see our opportunities that are out there and the threats. And most of the work for planning is done at that point because we've discussed it all. And then it's just a matter of actually getting a little more specific and saying, okay, we see this opportunity, we know this is a weakness, how are we going to do that? But we're not starting from zero. We really do most of the hard work in that SWOT analysis. If you don't have a large group where you can split into 4, if you have maybe only a couple of leaders, I would still have you each complete a SWOT analysis separately and then come together. And the discussion is a really big important part of that. Because you also might have some fundamental disagreements about where you are as an organization or what you're trying to do that comes out in that. So you can also get that out of the way right at the beginning of the year. And the way I know how valuable this is because I've been doing this with students for probably about 10 years. And like I say, we sit in a conference room for hours doing this. And we might work for 3 hours just sitting there straight with no break. And I have never once had a student tell me that was too much time. You know, that's how I know this is a valuable tool. Okay, so we have, you know, looked at the fundamentals documents of our organization. We've oriented ourselves to the world around us as it exists right now. Now it's time to actually make plans. And my recommendation for this is using the GOST method. Another acronym: goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics. CBI had a webinar not too long ago. I'm in charge now. What they talked about this a little bit, so I apologize if there's some repetition. They also, I give an example when I presented on this before that I use, and Mark Mabin, the advisor at Seton Hall Radio, he kind of liked my example, and his student was co-presenting it, and he didn't like my example. He said it was too like old school, but since it's mostly advisors here, I'm going to stick to that. But later, next time I do this for more of a student audience, I'm going to steal that student's example. But goals, objectives, strategies, tactics. First things are goals. And a lot of people get hung up on the difference between a goal and an objective. But in this case, what your goal is, high level, aspirational, vague. What does that remind you of we talked about before? A vision, right? That's something that's not, you know, we're going to, you know, increase our market share. That's not a goal. That's an objective. The goal is something maybe with a word like best in there, that kind of thing. Something high level. It doesn't have to be specific and measurable. So think about your goals, like, and I have some questions up here with like, what are we trying to do? What impact do we want to have? Where do we want to go? So my example, if like I'm a US general after Pearl Harbor, your goal is just win. Your goal is win the war. That's a big, big ask. It's vague. It's not specific. It's not a plan in and of itself. But it's ultimately what you hope to do. You get more specific when you get to objectives. That's where you get to something that is specific, has an outcome that you can write down on a piece of paper. It's tied to your goal, and you might have multiple objectives for a single goal, but that's specifically what you want to achieve. Win the war, that's a goal. The objective is force a German surrender within 5 years. You know, obviously you'd have another objective to deal with the Pacific Front, but certainly that's an objective to win the war. You've got to get Germany to surrender, put a timeline on it for 5 years. The key to writing good objectives, here comes acronym number 3, make them SMART. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Force a German surrender in 5 years. It's specific. You're certainly going to be able to measure whether or not Germany succeeds. As it turned out, it's attainable. It's certainly relevant to the goal of winning the war, and it's time-bound. That's something a lot of people forget about. It didn't just say force a German surrender. You know, this is very important, especially in student media where leadership is turning over a lot. Having an objective that's just floating out there, you know, there's no real urgency there, and it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day. So you really need to have a deadline in there. That's the T in making your objective SMART. So goal, big, overarching thing, objective, a specific outcome to get you to your goal. Then we get to the S and T of GOST, and you're starting to get a little more into the how. The first two are more of what's, and these are hows, starting with strategies, which are broader hows. How are you going to get that objective accomplished? You know, who's going to do this? What do we need to have in place to make it happen? What do we need to do? What pushback are we going to get? All those things are strategy. They're more of a higher level how. Okay, so Germany. So they are getting food and raw materials from occupied France. So our how is going to be, we're going to cut off those supply lines while they're busy fighting Russia in the East. You know, that is a strategy. That is how we're going to do it. It's not a what, but you need the how to make that what happen. And then you get super specific with tactics, you know, really specific. How are we going to do it? Who is actually going to do this? When? You know, what are our plan Bs if this doesn't work? All those kind of things. And again, you can have more than one tactic per strategy. One big tactic for, you know, for the US military in World War II, was it June 6, 1944? We're going to launch a surprise attack on Omaha Beach, D-Day, right? And all the specific details, whichever like Army units were involved in that, and how many, you know, troop carriers they need to sail across the English Channel, and all the supply lines, all that is tactics. So you're starting off with something really, really big, like winning a war, and then you're saying, on this day, this particular soldier will be in this place and will be gotten there by this way. That's what I really love about the GOST, because I think one of the challenges to having really big, ambitious goals is just how do you get there? You know, it just takes you step by step, little by little, smaller and more specific each time to make that really something that's attainable. So let's look at a student media example. Student radio station goal, increase your listening audience. I'm sure that applies to all of us in student media, right? We all want a bigger audience. So we'll have two objectives. Number one, you know, one of the great things in student media is you have like whole new people coming to campus every year. So we're gonna capture a bunch of those people. So we're 50% of new students to listen. Okay, I wrote this slide originally a couple of years ago. So you can make that 2020, 2021, 50% of new students to listen. You know, it's a SMART objective, right? They're listening this year. I think it's attainable if you said, we're gonna get 100% of new students to listen, not realistic. 50% seems realistic. But then I'm gonna have a second objective. You know, podcasts are a super big deal. We have some podcasts, we wanna grow there too. So to increase our listening audience, we're also going to double our podcast downloads by the end of fall semester. So how are we going to do this? So we'll have a few strategies and tactics. So 50% of new students to listen. Well, the first strategy is they've got to kind of know about us, have some, you know, some contact with us to start with. So during orientation week, we're going to get in front of as many new students as possible their first week on campus. So two tactics with that. There's always a big student activities fair. We are going to be super prominent there. So every student just about goes to that. You know, maybe they won't all come by our table, but most of them will. We're going to have a great giveaway. We'll give away something awesome. So they're all going to come to our table. And then we'll give them a little elevator pitch about who we are, why to listen, etc. And then we'll have a second tactic that we're going to go dip into our budget and we'll sponsor a concert during orientation week. Virtual, next year maybe a real concert, but we're going to spend a lot of money on a touring act, and it will be the coolest thing that they're going to do that week, and it's going to have our name all over it. So we are going to get to that 50% by getting so much market penetration and awareness that enough of them will check us out to, you know, to reach that 50%. Strategy two, we're not even going to wait for orientation week. We want to have another point of contact before that. So we are going to reach out to every incoming student before they even get here. That'll be our plan for the summer. And how are we going to do that? We're going to partner with our first year experience office, which has all that information. They're communicating all summer with those students before they get here about housing and all that other stuff. And we're going to partner with them on a mailing, and they're going to put in information about that, about the student radio station. And boom. And then I think that is a realistic plan to get 50% of students to listen. We had another objective as well. So with the other prong to our goal is downloading podcasts. A couple of strategies there. Number one, we have some great podcasts, but we don't have a lot of listeners. The quality is there, the marketing is not. So that's strategy one. Two tactics. First, okay, we're posting them on our website and our SoundCloud so people who know about us know where to get them, but nobody's stumbling upon them. So we're going to get them listed more widely on iTunes, Apple, wherever the big podcast lists are, we're going to be on those lists. And then number two, we're going to require the host to do more promotion. You might have a great pro wrestling podcast. Well, there's all kinds of online forums for pro wrestling. So if you want a podcast, if you want our support, you have to do some of that marketing. Go to all the forums you're already getting information from, post about it. You're going to get listeners that way. And then strategy number two, we have some good podcasts, but maybe there are holes in your market that you can attack with podcasts. Maybe they're niche things where maybe on your actual signal you don't want to do, but you don't want to like waste actual programming hours on because the audience isn't large enough, but maybe they're underserved, so you can do a podcast. An example like I've thought of with my students for a long time, they have not taken this advice yet, but we're in a city with a very small Asian population outside of the university. But we do have a ton of Chinese students and faculty members here. There's no Mandarin language media in our city. I think it would be great for them to come up with a Mandarin language podcast. I think we get a huge audience for it, on our campus Chinese community. So the tactic to make that happen is we could partner, and we don't have Mandarin speakers working at the station. We couldn't do that ourselves, but there is a really large Chinese Student and Scholar Association. Partner with them and train them on doing a podcast, offer them our studios. They can take care of the content, and boom, you have a podcast with a great audience, a captive audience, because there's no other local option, for that population in our city. We're going to have a ton of podcast downloads. That will take us, a long way to doubling our podcast downloads. So you see, you get from something super general, like increase our listening audience. I'm sure we all want to increase our audience, to something really specific, like having a podcast host posting something on a pro wrestling subreddit, and it's just step by step. You take this big goal, you break it down into something really manageable and attainable. So that's basically it. That is my formula for strategic planning for student media. I will, before we stop, go through just some different models for strategic planning, because I know some of you probably saying this might not work for me, this might work for me, or there's some pieces that make sense and some that don't. The first one is pretty much what we've already talked about. And I'll say managementhelp.org has some really good resources about some of these models. Go if you want to learn a little bit more about that. But vision-based or goal-based is more or less what we talked about. Have this foundation of a mission and vision, goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics. The other part of it that really makes it a plan that we haven't talked about is documentation and assessment. So you want to actually have this somewhere, exist in written form. And then you also want us, you can go back to it, you can look at it, and we understand it's a living document, right? Things are going to change, so you'll have to change your plans accordingly. So you're documenting and assessing. That's, again, basically what we've been talking about. Number two is issues-based. All we've talked about has been kind of a longer process, right? If you do not have time for that, if you're in some kind of crisis right now, let's say like nobody came back to campus, everyone's remote, you have two people trying to run an entire radio or TV station, and student government board saying, you don't have enough people left to deserve funding, so we're going to cut your funding. If you're in crisis, you don't have time to do all this other stuff. You do an issues-based plan, which is short-term. It's focused on weaknesses and threats. So you do your SWOT analysis, identify weaknesses and threats, and rather than going through a whole GOST, you're focusing on strategies. So focus weakness, threats, and strategies, and then, again, you're documenting and assessing. Short-range plan for times of crisis. Third plan is the alignment model. Alignment model is an internal review of what you're doing, again, based on assessing and adjusting. So one of the times that the alignment model really comes in handy is if you feel you've done all the things we've talked about, you have your foundational documents, you've done a SWOT analysis, your GOST, and just things still aren't working. You look at the alignment model and everything should just I like to use the example of like pistons in a car firing one after the other. It should all be aligned, or like the vertebrae in your spine should be straight. Sometimes something kind of gets a little out of alignment, and then you've got a backache, you know, or your car is misfiring. So you really review all of these things and see where the problem is. It means something's out of alignment. In my experience, there are a couple of things I would focus on, a couple of areas that tend to be where alignment becomes an issue. Number one is the SMART. Remember the acronym SMART is getting into your objectives, making sure they're relevant. There's a term mission creep in the Army where it's kind of like you start out trying to do one thing and little by little you morph into doing something else. That happens a lot in organizations as well. So maybe you're saying your mission is here and your goal, your vision is here, but just because over time things shift little by little, what you're actually doing is over here. It's not relevant. So people are either joining your organization or tuning into your station, expecting one thing and getting something different because you've kind of gotten a little out of alignment. The other thing to look at if you're doing the alignment model is strategies. Sometimes everything works, but your strategies just aren't well thought out. So those are a couple of things to look at for alignment model if your plans are not working. You can also do this on a single goal. If you have a big goal, rather than being a whole organizational goal, but if you're focusing in one major project, you can also just assess everything you're doing and to make sure it's aligned toward that goal, you know, separate from your overall organizational stuff. Next thing is scenario planning. Scenario planning is a great exercise to do when things are good and say, you know what, we're great now, but we have the luxury now of thinking about maybe things won't be so great. What's going to happen in the future? What if, right? What if this, what if that? I think we were all left scrambling in March, right? When our universities shut down and we're trying to operate media outlets. What if last year, earlier in the year, you had thought, what if we had a scenario where we couldn't access our facilities? You know, how much better prepared would you have been? Not that anyone predicted this pandemic, but part of this involves, part of being a visionary leader involves thinking about things you can't imagine that would happen. And you could have had strategies all worked out and say, well, I know this app, we can go to this, or I know, you know what, we're going to need 18 different levels of permission from IT to remote into our studio. We can start working on that now. We can start laying the groundwork on it now, rather than when they're trying to keep classes going and you're bothering them about a radio station. So think about these things, what might happen, you know, some strategies for each, best case, worst case, medium case. One of the other things about this kind of planning is it does sometimes point out some vulnerabilities you have. Maybe you haven't thought about, or everything's fine now, but you know what, we're pretty close to these 3 potential scenarios we mapped out, but this is all a sticking point. You know, something else emerges, and then you can really focus some energies there on something you didn't realize. Here's a great example for scenario planning. I'm a big football fan. New England Patriots have been a great team for 2 decades now. And one of their first Super Bowl wins, I think it was maybe 2004, they had a ton of injuries in their defensive backfield to the point where they had a wide receiver named Troy Brown playing defense for them. And they kept winning. They just kept winning. It was unbelievable. They had this guy playing out of position against quarterbacks like Peyton Manning, like Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks, and they were still beating them with this guy playing out of position. And it came out after the season ended that way back in the previous training camp in August, the coach Bill Belichick gave Troy Brown some reps in the defensive backfield, just in case there was some incredible rash of injuries down the line. That's what scenario planning is. What are the chances you'll have all your players at one position hurt? Pretty slim, but just in case, he had this guy practicing out of position, so he was ready and he won the Super Bowl. That is scenario planning. A couple of other quick things, a couple of other models. These are more also predicated on the fact that this whole, vision-based model we've talked about takes a really long time. And there's certainly a school of thought that the world changes so rapidly right now. By the time you finish a long planning process, it starts to get outdated already. So these last two kind of are in that context. The first one is they call organic planning, where you're not doing a whole top-down leaders doing this. It's more of a collaborative process that focuses on visions and values, and then you get all your members of your organization to act in a way to go toward that vision. So again, using a student radio station example, you might have a vision and values of what kind of music you want to play. Like at our station, if you remember our values, like we're trying to deal with underrepresented artists and genres. So that's our value. But rather than mandating a certain playlist, we can say, okay, this is our value. You work and get buy-in from all your DJs, and then they can do whatever they want within that vision, to get to that vision and within those values. That's organic planning. You want to dialogue a lot, talk, make sure everyone's on board, because you do require buy-in from your organization there. And it's also a little more of an educational thing, because it is dialogue-based. It's not about, this is the best practice, so do it this way. It's more like, hey, here's our vision, here's our values, go have at it. And then you get back together and you say, so what did you do? How did it work? Did that show that you created, did that fit in our values? What do you think? Did it help us achieve our vision? Go from there. This is not something to do in a time of crisis where you need immediate results. And this is not something to do if you do not feel your organization is on board. Maybe they need a firm hand of leadership to point them in the right direction. Maybe they just don't get what you're trying to do. But if you do, have confidence that you've got a really strong, cohesive team that has the buy-in, this might work for you. The last one is real-time planning. And again, this is based on the theory that, the world changes too fast. You just can't plan. So what this says is you establish your foundational documents, your mission, vision, values, and then you continually change from there. You're continually saying, oh, we're doing this. Nope, we've got to do this. We've got to do that now. And you're shifting gears really, really rapidly. So I don't think this works so well for student media, only because to do this successfully, you need a really, really strong continual stream of data. If you're BuzzFeed, and you're constantly getting millions of page views, you can very quickly see what your audience likes, what they don't. If your websites have that much traffic, or if you have access to Nielsen overnight ratings, more power to you. I don't know how many student organizations that fits for, but that's something. That's another type of planning that's out there. And, I think there is some truth to the fact that, especially in an organization, student media, where you're going to change leadership a lot, that doing a 6-month planning process maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. But this might be a little bit too fly by the seat of your pants to really do it successfully for a student media organization. Okay, so just to recap, foundational documents, vision, mission, core values, orient yourself to your surroundings, SWOT analysis, plan with GOST, and then, if these things, maybe some work for you, some don't, we have 6 models for, for you to choose from for what you think fits best your organization. And that is pretty much it for me. Jessica gave you my CBI email, but you can also get to me right here if you want a copy of these slides. If you have any questions, feel free to just raise your hand or chat right now and we can get to them, or you can feel free to email me at any time. Any questions now? Yeah, Michelle.
Greg, we have what we call the Cross Media Council that includes the leadership of all our media organizations, including the PR marketing aspect as well, and ads. And I'm wondering if it would be too high-handed for the Cross Media Council to take on suggestions for, or what they see as mission statements for the separate groups that they kind of are trying to coordinate or cross promote, or if that's too much. I can have them do this for, and you know, we've all been through these types of things, but I haven't thought about it in terms of student media before. I could have the Cross Media Council do this for themselves as a group, but then I'm not sure if it would work for them to push that down to the separate orgs, and if you've seen that anywhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly a lot of it depends on how converged those operations are. You know, if they're just simply different organizations that have somebody sit around a table once in a while, that might be challenging. You'll definitely get into some real cultural issues with that, in my experience. If there is a real, you know, converged thing where obviously a radio station is doing radio things and a TV station is doing TV things and PR is doing PR things, you know, obviously there's some difference in there, but if they all feel like they're identifying down the line with this council, that might work. You know, I think it's a matter of assessing the relationships of the different organizations in there and how much buy-in they feel and how vested they are in that council as a whole. Because it might be too high-handed if they're just really look at themselves more as individual units that happen to sit on this thing versus being part of a larger whole.
And that varies by semester, of course, so, and who's on the CMC.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be perfectly reasonable for the CMC to come up with their own mission and vision and to make it general enough that should apply to all of the things, and then have an expectation that if each of these groups are going through this process themselves, theirs has to align with the larger councils. That's what I would do if I were in your shoes. I would have a one just for the council and then set the expectation. Sure, you can come up with your own mission, but it has to align with ours.
Thank you.
Sure.
There's a question in the chat from Sydney Roach. It's how visible to the public should your mission and vision statements be?
Yeah, I think they should be totally visible. I think these are things to message internally and externally. So I think they should be prominent on your website. And I think they should also be like physically posted in your control room or wherever people are. Because I think, again, the best mission and vision statements, they're telling your audience what you're all about. They're telling potential members what you're all about. They're telling your university stakeholders what you're all about. And also they're a reminder for your internal members. And again, a few years ago at WPTS, we redid all of this stuff and we made it much more prominent. And it really has solved a lot of internal problems for us as well. You know, one of the challenges, and I'm sure the college radio folks can relate to this, is having, you know, kind of this loose, anything goes college radio format, but still having a format where it's like, okay, we don't want to hear certain things. You know, in radio formats in general, kind of like, you know it when you hear it kind of things, where it's kind of hard to explicitly say why this fits and that doesn't, especially in a free form environment. So one of the things we've really done is we've been really big on like our mission and our vision and our values. And our values involve underrepresented, and our number one value is diverse, underrepresented content. So we have that all over the place, and we have our DJs understand our format and are on board with it much more, because rather than getting into a situation where we say, you know, you shouldn't be playing this, and it becomes like, it's not regarded as a holier than thou, well, you think my music sucks kind of thing. It's become, oh, you know what? Remember our mission, remember our vision, remember our values, what we're really trying to do here. This really isn't underrepresented. So it doesn't become a value judgment on their taste. It becomes more of, hey, look, you know, we all talked about when you started, this was what we're here to do, and this didn't fit. So I think these should be really prominent internally and externally. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks for participating. I hope you got something out of this. Again, feel free to email me for a copy of the slides, or if you have any other questions that you can think of right now. But if not, I think we're good, right, Jessica?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And hopefully everybody's gonna check out our Audacity demo on October 14th and then come back to the convention October 28th through 30th. Like I said, it's online, so we're coming to you and we're making it as accessibly inexpensive as ever. So we can't wait to see everyone there. All right, thanks y'all. Have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.